Stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, take the roll.
O'Connor.
Here.
Morissette. Alms.
Here.
McCormick.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Hoggett.
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
Start out with public hearing on rezoning of property located at 708 Public Street from R2 two-family business, from two-family residential to B4 Central Business District, and to amend the 2009 City of Hudson Comprehensive Plan land use designation single and two-family residential to downtown commercial. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to this? It's a public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to this? Mike, you gonna?
Just want to make sure that it gets entered into the record, the letter in your packets from Ms. Karen Nessett and Mr. David Estreen, the letter regarding their position on the proposal.
Okay. Anyone here to speak on this? Anyone here to speak on this? Anyone here to speak on this? Is there a motion?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Got a motion, second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Public hearing is closed. We're into the citizen comments portion. Is there anyone here who would like to have anything to say? Again, please identify yourself and address. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Yasha Bowl. I live at 724th Street here in Hudson, and I'm a junior up at the high school. And as some of you may know, I am affiliated with the Inclusion Resolution Group. I am the president of the GSA, otherwise known as the Gender Sexuality Alliance. And one common theme in that role is being entrusted with unwilling secrets. I have met dozens of kids who do not share their identities, be they sexual or otherwise, with their families for the sake of fear. Ruminate on that. Children afraid of their parents knowing simply who they are. That is not parenting. It is a hand over a mouth or a hand over a heart. It is a symptom. My mother always says, I can tell her anything. I know this to be a truth, but it is not a universal one. We include, if only to reinstate trust in a relationship, like parent to child, like government to citizen, to allow the LGBTQ kids to feel safe in a house and a life built for them, to allow those secrets to be safely unlocked. Thus, I am asking you, we are asking you, to bring the inclusion resolution to a vote this November, a public vote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Mary Sakulu, and I live on 146 Bridgewater Trail, and I'm also a junior at Hudson High School. Today I'm going to be telling a story about my Muslim friend's first football game at Hudson High School. So the night started, and we were all super excited to go to the football game, and our smiles quickly faded when we found ourselves seated in front of a group of boys that were chanting, "Build that wall." The boys began throwing garbage within our direction, and we decided to move seats. Nonetheless, the placement of the boys wasn't coincidental at all, and they followed us as we moved. Later that night, I heard one of the boys ask his friend, should I pull it, while he reached for my friend's hijab. If you guys don't know, a hijab is the headscarf that Muslim girls wear as like a respect to their religion. And she never felt so violated and demeaned in her life. And since it means so much to her, it meant a lot to me, and to see the hurt in her eyes when this happened just really bothered me that this would happen in Hudson. And as I conclude this story, I have one question in mind. If Hudson is already inclusive, what encouraged these boys' behavior? It is said that hate is a learned behavior, so let us teach of love. I'm a Christian myself, and the Bible says in 1 Peter 4:8, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. My friends and I choose to live a life that is with open hearts. Rue is Middle Eastern and Muslim. My friend Emily is Mexican and she's Catholic, and my friend Sarah is European and Catholic as well. Somehow we all find a way to love each other despite our differences, and if my group of friends can be welcoming and loving, then I feel that the inclusion resolution is a mark that everyone in Hudson can uphold. Let us live through love and not through hate. Only then can we be strong and united. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, my name is Carrie Gerkink. I live at 195 West Canyon Drive, and I was here last August to speak in support of the inclusion resolution. And after that meeting, I met with, I'm now retired from a company in St. Paul. The name of the company is Securian Financial Group. And I met with the head of our Human Resources Department because I was really intrigued by her new title. Her new title is Inclusion Manager. She's in charge of inclusion. So what I wanted to know from her is what compelled this conservative financial services company to want to be public with a word like inclusion. And I thought I would share that with you today because if the emotional appeal of these two beautiful young women here doesn't move you, perhaps this business argument would. What she had to share with me was that Securian Financial Group feels that inclusion is just plain good business. It's simply put that if the organization wants to recruit and retain the best and the brightest, they can no longer have a narrow view of what it means to be a financial services organization. They have to look outward. And younger generations that are coming in have a more worldly view of the kind of organization they want to spend their career with. And this is different from being, a Packer or a Viking fan or a choice that someone might make about their values. This has to do with a large business that wants to send a message that we want to do business with those that want to do business with us. And then she took it one step further and she said, Carrie, this isn't just about who we want to recruit and retain. Other businesses that we do business with, they write large group life insurance policies, for example, they're now requiring it as part of their spec and RFP process. So they're asking questions about this financial services firm of, tell us proactively what you're doing in order to retain people of minority status, people who have different types of religion, people who are different, because they don't want to do business with racist, bigoted organizations. So I share this with you because I was really impressed that this company I worked for such a long time that many times I felt like the odd person out being a woman in financial services has changed so dramatically in the last couple of years. And if we want to keep here in Hudson the best and the brightest that we see represented today, I encourage you to move forward on the inclusion resolution and bring it to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Tony Bowl. I'm at 720 4th Street in Hudson, Wisconsin. Thank you again for listening to our comments. I want to especially thank our juniors from the high school and Carrie as well. My comments have good and bad news. My comment is that inclusion is happening. The institutions around Hudson, churches, the YMCA, our arts institutions, our businesses, have little projects of inclusion. They kind of whisper it to me that they're doing this. They see the letters to the editor, they know this conversation's taking place, but they know that in small steps they're going to do it. So the good news is that our narrative is making an impact on the people around us and that they are taking this forward in the ways they know how to. The bad news is that Hudson suffers from a particular civic group that seeks out to intimidate and harass people who are out for any form of diversity, that are out to support it. They have gone after you. We've seen your emails. We know that what they send. We know what they have put. They also have gone after the River Falls. They've gone after school boards. They've gone after our churches. They go after these things in a swarm. This is the Citizens for the St. Croix Valley. And one of their goals, and I'll read it right from their website, which is build a strong activism network that will protect our community from those who seek to destroy our way of life. And their way of life is not about diversity. There is not about inclusion. We have an outspoken group that now, our group, these girls, our friends, are going to stand up, and we're going to stand up to support them, support the people who are trying to take a stand for diversity, support you when you're being harassed, support our high school, support our churches. This group is going to continue. We may be in a time of setbacks, but we're not in a time of failure for a lot of movement towards being inclusive to new communities. Thank you for your time. I hope you'll bring this inclusion resolution to a vote in November.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other comments? Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll close this portion of the agenda. Get into the consent agenda.
To approve the regular meeting minutes of the October 2nd, 2017 council, to approve claims in the amount of $713,296.13, contingent on payment of any outstanding debt owed to the city and successful completion of the background check, to approve the issuance of 5 regular operator licenses on file at the city clerk's office for the period of October 17th, 2017 to June 30th, 2019, to place on file the September 12th, 2017 and October 10th, 2017 Public Utility Commission meeting minutes, to place on file the third quarter building inspection report, to proceed with updating the municipal code, section 106-8 and 106-35 as outlined per the direction of the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services, to approve filing the necessary paperwork with the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services to become a delegate municipality, to approve a conditional use permit for induced sales and service for a temporary fuel tank at 2800 Enlow Street with conditions, to approve a conditional use permit for induced sales and service for a temporary use structure sales office trailer at 2800 Enlow Street with conditions, to approve a certified survey map for Girard Development Girard Companies for 2 lots and 1 outlot as presented, to approve the final development plans for the Carmichael Girard Development Girard Companies.
Can I pull that, please?
Okay. To approve the optional 3rd year of assessment services to be provided by Bomar Appraisal, Inc. for 2018, and to approve reserving 2 parking spaces in front of 512 2nd Street for an alpaca pen for Surrey Oaks grand opening on October 19th, 2017 from 3 to 8 p.m.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion second for approval. Roll call.
Morissette?
Yes.
Alms?
Yes.
McCormick?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Hoggett?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Motion's approved. We go back to
K.
K. Item K, final development plans for the Carmichael parcel ID number 236-1975-07-000. Girard Development, Girard Companies. Jim?
Well, I'm just a little bit concerned because this is in my mind, this is the first I've really heard anything about this project. So to have it come up on the consent agenda, it hasn't been on our agendas anywhere else that I'm aware of. So other than discussions about the land. So did I miss a meeting or?
Mike?
Plan Commission reviewed and approved the concept development plans, I would say probably 2 months ago. And then we also had the Plan Commission review the CSM, and that was at the last meeting we had, previous to tonight. And then the final development plans were reviewed tonight. And plus we had the construction easement agreement that we authorized, the council authorized at the last common council meeting.
So what's the impact of this unit going to be on our, for example, we're starting to talk about our sewer capacity. We're at another 72 units. It's like half of Carmichael Ridge we're adding here in terms of impact, maybe more.
In terms of, it's not a capacity issue in that we've allocated, it's within our city limits already. So we aren't taking on new property. It does require an extension of sewer service to the property, which the developer is proposing to pay for. KIP's reviewed the proposal, as well as other development or other department heads, and we're at a point now where we're comfortable with moving it forward. There's still a few remaining stormwater issues we're trying to work out, as well as a few other engineering things that the city engineer and I are
That's
addressing.
the references.
Yep.
In the statement here that they have to follow up to them. And then the other thing, when I look at the at the plan, and I drove that road for 25 years. That's a very sharp turn that accesses the, I even forget the name of that back road there.
Maxwell?
Yeah, but are we making any allowances? It doesn't look like there's any allowance on the planning for a pull-off lane or slow-down. That's 45, 50 miles an hour there. And are we gonna increase the number of cars that's gonna be taking turn there? Is this gonna be part of the Carmichael plan? We're gonna pay the cost for this, or can we?
It's all, it was all contemplated as part of the Carmichael Road Corridor study, and then we also looked at it again as part of the dog track redevelopment project.
Yeah, but I think there needs to be a pull-off lane there.
Okay.
Or at least someone, we need to examine that, because that's.
But if they're accessing it, there's no direct access from,
Yeah, there's right up here.
isn't that,
It's on the downside, on the south side of the,
It's a public street. It's the other side of Maxwell. It comes off of.
oh, I got you.
yeah, there's another one that shows that. So I would have some concern about, and if that cost should be part of this development as opposed to being part of the Carmichael Road project.
I'm not convinced that our traffic consultant had recommended a turn lane there for that property.
They had or hadn't?
Had not, I don't
Okay.
believe. You know, in terms of overall, the intensity of that use, because it is an elderly
Right.
housing project, you know, I don't know if it'll generate the same traffic volumes at a traditional, like a standard market rate apartment or subsidized apartment would. The applicant is here and can answer some of those questions too, and what they see in other projects like this that they've developed.
Well, that's a pretty bad turn there, because you go around the corner, you're going up a hill.
Yep, and we've
It's, not
explored,
built.
you know, some traffic will obviously go off onto Hanley. It'd be
Right.
easiest for most people to go to the traffic lights at Hanley, turn right, and then go in by the car wash right there on Maxwell.
Right,
And then come, because then you're at least in a controlled intersection.
absolutely.
Well, I know that the Plan Commission has seen and then been going through this project for a couple months now, if not 3 or more. D, I don't know if it addresses your issues, Jim, or not, but there certainly is in sight of the Carmichael Street. And then Maxwell, and I don't know if that addresses his issue or not, under the K under D. Either way, I'm comfortable with what they've recommended, so I will move that we approve this development for parcel ID number.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion?
The other point I would raise is that we're already having discussions about Maxwell being a issue. Maxwell, Hanley, and Carmichael being a traffic issue. So now we're going to add more traffic there, and we're not changing anything. So I'm just not certain that this is, I think we just need to address the traffic piece, that it is going to increase traffic.
I think it'll be easier to address your concerns once we have that Carmichael study, and then we can move forward with it that way.
Mike, did you say that Hanley and Maxwell would have semaphores?
Say that again, excuse me?
Did you say Maxwell, where it meets Hanley, is gonna be semaphored when this development goes in?
Yeah.
That's traffic lights.
Yep. So the traffic lights at Maxwell? No, there wouldn't be traffic. That'd be too
Okay.
close to Hanley.
It's a busy place.
It is, and getting busier. I guess, while it is a challenge, it's a good challenge, I think, that as a community to face. And I think we're doing the right things in terms of going through the Carmichael Road Corridor study. From my perspective, and my staff recommendation would be, we're looking at all those issues, and while I think this will obviously add some cars to I think it's also incumbent upon the developer potentially to help with education, to move people instead of maybe turning off on Maxwell to go up to Hanley, and just instruct the residents that that's a safer alternative for the residents to use, and I don't think that they'd be opposed to that. Obviously, there could be some discussion later on of another street that would connect back up by, further, I guess that'd be east on Hanley, if we can avoid having to, do another cut or something like that. But, I think there are workable solutions here. I think even if they did the second phase, the first phase, you'll know a lot more than you. Remember, this is a two-phase deal. This is the first 36 units. You'll see the impact of what that does, and then you can make an educated, I think, decision at that point and say, okay, if you're going to do, phase 2, we're going to require access because we've seen what the impact of phase 1 is.
The other question I have is, when's this gonna happen?
As soon as possible, they'd like to start. I think they want to at least get the site ready this fall. Not pave any streets, obviously. We don't like to see curb poured after October 15th. So what they would do is hopefully get utilities in and then have temporary access so they could be doing construction, weather permitting.
Are we able to start slowing the speed limit down before? Because it's not a state highway, right? This is under our jurisdiction. I'm talking about just kind of overall thinking here.
I think that's an outcome that's I think we'll talk about that as we get wrapped up with the study.
But we have control over that section of road.
I believe so, Tom. You might be able to speak to that better than I could.
Oh, except for the north end.
Yeah,
It is a county highway,
it is a county highway.
but I don't know as far as jurisdiction.
Yeah, because there's some weird rules about change, like you have to,
Well, the north end of Carmichael is split down the middle between the township and Hudson.
okay,
But going south, it's
So-
Highway F.
Right.
okay. I just remember there being strange rules about changing speed limits, that's all.
Mike, the people that are going out of this development going north on Carmichael are gonna have a way to get onto it without having to go through Maxwell and Hanley, right?
No, there's one way in, well, two ways in, Maxwell and in Hanley. So that's why there's the cul-de-sacs in there to turn around, and then there's also emergency access off of Carmichael. You'll see we have a similar one on the other side for Beaneman Farms, where it's a reinforced turf that if there was a scenario where further north of Carmichael or Maxwell Drive, the extension was compromised, that a fire truck could, or an ambulance or whatever it may be, there'd be blow-through barriers, little pedestals, and then we could get emergency access from that side as well.
Because currently you can go northbound onto Carmichael to avoid the intersection at Maxwell and Hanley.
Right.
And that's gonna be closed?
No,
That's still gonna be there, that's what I was
Yes.
asking.
Yes.
People can go northbound
Correct.
without going through that intersection.
yes,
Okay.
yep.
Which is good, but in order to go south on Carmichael, they'll have to go up and then take that Hanley light, and that's a
Yep.
bad intersection there, we know that.
And that one, and that one's absolutely,
Out to Carmichael, go up to Hanley and do a U-turn.
the Hanley,
Yeah, made it illegal, okay.
Boy, I guess,
and that's,
be quiet now.
But, John, I think that's a good point, right? Because from a traffic generation perspective, nobody can come out and go southbound on Carmichael from this development. They would have to go all the way up to the controlled intersection
Yep.
and go out that way.
Right. We were just saying that intersection's kind of scary, because people are booking along Hanley there.
And that one is certainly, I mean, we have the business park traffic, a lot of it. You have just, people from Troy coming up to and from work, and people heading south. I mean, that's part of that's gonna be one of the main intersections, I think, that
Almost
would
like
be.
we gotta, that's a public safety thing, but almost like we gotta slow it down somewhere in that process, I don't know. Just thinking long-term.
We're well aware of that intersection,
Yeah.
and Bill's been pretty adamant about taking care of things up there.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I guess I just had one question. This little bump out, that's just for a turnaround, Mike? That's just north of the
Yep.
development of Lot 1?
Yep, it's like a half cul-de-sac.
It's not like a future build-out or anything?
Nope.
Okay. That's all I got.
Anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on formation of EMS ad hoc committee.
All right, in your packets, you got the proposal, and I haven't changed the committee makeup, same as last meeting. So me, Jim Weber, Paul Rohde, Colleen Hammer, and Bill Campbell. Any questions about the proposal?
Move to approve.
A second?
Okay, got a motion and second for approval of formation of the ad hoc. Does this?
This is their kind of purpose and
Right.
statement and life expectancy and appointment procedure, which
Is included here.
if this is, approved, then you can go ahead and appoint the members.
Okay. All right, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved.
Yeah, I need a motion for appointing the members.
I move to appoint the members as listed.
By Joyce. Can you repeat those so the clerk can get them?
So, me, Jim Weber, Paul Rohde, Colleen Hammer, and Bill Campbell.
Okay,
I'll second that.
we've got a motion and second discussion.
I will, if you could get me their contact info.
Yes.
At some point, that's not right away, but just so I can get on the website.
Sure.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on 2018 street improvements, Hanley Road from Carmichael Road to Heritage Boulevard, letter of engagement with Bolton and Menk for engineering services, authorization to prepare plans and specifications, and consider recommendation from Public Safety Committee regarding installing crosswalks at Hanley Road, at O'Neill Road with curb cuts and crossing flags. Tom?
Thank you. I think maybe what we should do, as you know, this item was, it's the second time in front of the council. We had this, basically the same item with the same issue sheet and recommendation as was at the last council meeting. And if I could, the second part of the agenda item that says, and consider recommended from Public Safety Committee regarding installing crosswalks at Hanley Road and O'Neill with curb cuts and crossing flags. I'd like to, if we could, separate that as a more or less a second item after the rest of this. I thought we were going to have that as a second item, but for the purpose of the discussion, I think it would be helpful if we had that as a second item. With that, maybe what I'll do is just hit a couple of points that we brought up as an introduction for what happened last council meeting, bring out a couple of new pieces of information that I received from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation late last week, and then go into the staff recommendation from there. As you know, we looked at a couple of different options for streets for our 2018 street improvement project. We discussed that with the Public Works, and where we landed relative to a recommendation was to do Hanley Road, and there's basically two phases. The first one goes from Carmichael up to O'Neill Road South, and the second phase was from O'Neill Road South east to Heritage Boulevard. From a funding perspective, we came up with, it's almost just shy of $900,000 project. And between the annual mill and overlay budget, the balance of what was in the 2017 street improvement project, which was Grandview Drive, and a couple other areas, we came up with somewhere around $116,000 of a shortfall. In talking with Brenda, we've pretty much found about half of that, and maybe found's the wrong word, but street projects, various concrete sidewalk project for this year that had more or less, let's say, underruns. So for the most part, about half of that $116,000 number is already can be found in other project underruns. Some of the things brought up, and we've kind of touched on them here already, are safety concerns about Hanley Road. There's been some questions brought up last meeting. Speed's been brought up. One of the things we did talk about at the end of last meeting, prior to kind of tabling this, was if Hanley Road is selected as the project, as part of the plan prep procedure, we could look at the things the speed issues, the ped ramp and crossing issues. And in so doing, I guess it's hard for me. I was not in the Public Safety Committee meeting when this was discussed, but when you're looking at an intersection relative to a pedestrian crossing, and I've talked this topic, I've talked with Glenn Van Warmer as well, who's with SEH and done a lot of our traffic studies, and he's the lead person in the corridor study on Carmichael as well. But to look at one intersection and come up with recommendations on a crosswalk is probably not the right way to go, and by that we mean we should look at more or less the whole length, and by the whole length in this case, we probably should look at Hanley from Carmichael all the way to 35 if we're going to look at pedestrian crossings, or if we're going to look at crosswalks. We don't want to zoom in on one intersection. We should look at that whole stretch. And again, based on some of the discussion last meeting, we thought we could do that type of an analysis in the plan prep stages if we do go forward with the Hanley Road. That said, I know another one of the concerns was the detours, that the potential detours on the because of the DOT projects. We talked about a detour that was going to put additional traffic on Hanley Road. We talked about another detour that was going to put additional traffic on Vine Street. As of last Thursday, the DOT has informed me that there will be no detour and there will be no additional traffic on Hanley. They're going to reconfigure some of the things east of town and use exit up at Highway 12. So there will be no detour required on Hanley. Second part of that is, it's not a 100% guarantee, but it sounds like there will be no detour on Vine Street as well. The only thing keeping that from being a guarantee is they are going to reconfigure the detour, and they're actually going to send traffic across the river to the interchange on the other side and then reroute them underneath and back. So they've come up with a new detour plan that includes the intersection, or I guess you could say the interchange on the other side of the river. And the only reason why we can't say it's not a guarantee is they have to get a permit from the Minnesota Department of Transportation, but they see that as probably a definite, and they don't think that's going to be a problem. So that said, our gut reaction is standing here is we're not going to have a detour on either one of those roads from the DOT project.
Well, thanks for getting that done for us, Tom.
So, and again, I know getting back to Hanley Road, so from a staff perspective, our recommendation has not changed as far as what we think we should go forward with on a 2018 street improvement project. I know we could get into the discussion of Vine Street, but just without getting too detailed, it's my belief that we are too late in the year to start with a Vine Street project. We've talked about some things not being budgeted relative to water main facilities, relative to sanitary sewer facilities. To start now, there's some televising of sewers that we would have to do. There's some upfront coordination with just the general public. We're late in the year to do preliminary surveys. I could throw out a couple other items too, but it's my belief that we're just too late in the year. We had a lot of, let's say, coordination that had to occur on that project, the previous Vine Street project with private utilities. In other words, gas, electric, and telephone. I know we had early meetings with them, I believe, possibly even the first week of September 2 years ago when we started that project. So there's another issue that, again, we'd have to renegotiate a letter of engagement and for our design consultants, and I just think it's too late in the year to go forward with that type of a project at this point. Couple other things
so we
relative.
should start that sooner then. If we were going to do Vine Street in 2019, we should get going on that now.
Well, I mean, if you know you're going to go forward, I agree 100%. the earlier the better, but, I mean, we'd be the end of November before we'd be into, you know, getting a contract negotiated with a consultant. We'd have to get some quotes to do sanitary sewer televising.
Tell me how did Vine Street get lost again?
It didn't really get lost, what he is saying here, and we still can consider it, but we could have gone back to committee as well, but the problem here is what Tom is saying is that we started the original Vine Street almost a year and a half before we got going on it, and right now, there's so much in there that we've kind of missed that, so to do it in 2018 would be, it'd be challenging. So we could still consider it, however, and we could do the flip-flop. The other thing that Tom is probably gonna get to is that in the Carmichael corridor, one of our concerns with the Hanley thing is we didn't know if that intersection would change or not, and it sounds like paint would be the only thing that would be changing there and not a physical structure change. So that was one of the other things. But to answer your question, and we haven't said we shouldn't do Vine Street next year, but it's gonna be really, really hard to do that.
I think originally, correct me if I'm wrong, I think,
Yeah, we're confusing about 2 or 3 items here.
but Vine Street, I think we were looking at potentially a detour in 2018, which is why, correct? I mean, originally, way back when, which is maybe why it got moved.
Trying to
20
sequence our projects with the DOT projects is why we did not do it in 2017.
But it was the intention of this council to have the rest of Vine Street done, and I believe we decided to do that, and who decided that it was not gonna be done?
I don't think.
As far as I know, there was no firm commitment to do Vine Street by the council at any time. We talked about it.
To be clear, Andy, we were gonna talk about it in this meeting, which is what we're doing. And we still could go back. The problem, and I've talked to Tom, at least once before this meeting, and it seems extremely clear that we're jumping the gun on that size of project. We're just too late. If we wanna do Vine Street this year, we should have started like a year
I
ago.
get that, and
And I didn't realize that either, so I would have probably said, hey, but I think Tom has done good work and good research on the detours and everything like that, so it was the committee recommendation to do Hanley, because it really made sense, and it wasn't such a huge budget impact either.
I would be curious to see the past records, Devin, on meetings of Vine Street and the completion of the rest of it from 12 to Wisconsin, if there's any.
I can check. I don't know that there was ever any formal motion made. There was discussions. There was nothing in the 2017, 2018 capital project. Yes? Okay. But,
Thank you.
yep, so that answers your question.
Well, did it come from your direction, Public Works Committee, that we're skipping the rest of Vine Street to go to Hanley?
It was in our 5-year plan, and there were 2 chunks of Hanley in year 1 and year 3. And because we got money back from Grandview, like, hey, we could get this project done without having to do a lot of extra financing or funding. So it seemed like a good idea. And then 2019 was on our 5-year capital plan, which we discussed in February, I think, to do in 2019. And if we decide to leave this Hanley in 2018 and Vine in 2019, we need to start Vine Street now also to get it done, because it's a full reconstruct, not just a resurfacing like Hanley is. So,
If I could interject, I think the easiest way to explain this is if we go back a year ago, we meaning staff, brought a recommendation to the Public Works Committee, and it was probably last September, October, pretty close to a year ago. And at that time, we had our 5-year list, like you mentioned, John, and we were talking about Hanley, we were talking about Vine Street. Those were probably the 2, and then we had some others. We had 4 or 5 streets listed there. So if you go back a year ago, the reason we, meaning Public Works Committee, did not select Vine Street is we were worried about putting additional traffic, meaning the DOT detour. So because we were told by the DOT that there was going to be a project resulting in a detour, we recommended not doing Vine Street because it was pretty much impossible to do Vine Street with a detour from the DOT on it. That was a year ago. So at that time, our recommendation to Public Works was, we're gonna do Grandview Drive. That recommendation, as far as I know, went forward to City Council, and City Council voted on the 2017 project to be Grandview Drive. Now, this year, we came to the Public Works Committee again, and we said, well, we still haven't done Vine Street. However, they're still supposed to do this detour. They're still having it. They have plans. I have copies of them upstairs that show the detour being Carmichael and Vine Street for that project. So we were recommending Hanley. It has just been the last week, like I said, I found out late Thursday or Friday that they have now redesigned their detour and they're not using Vine Street, assuming they get their permit from the Minnesota DOT. So the sequence of events and why why Vine Street was not done is pretty much 100% tied into, we didn't want to do it with a detour from the DOT project. That is now, and it's kind of a shame because now we shuffled things around for something that's not going to happen, i.e. the detour.
Brenda, were those restricted funds or?
No, when you approved the 2017, 2018 projects, Vine Street was identified as 18, but when we bonded, it was called street improvements because we don't want to, in case projects change. So we have, that is in the bond resolution, that is for street improvements, but not a certain project.
But we identified that and put monies aside for that project, and staff recommended and Public Works changed that. Is that what I'm hearing?
In February, when you approved the 2017, 2018 projects, Vine Street was identified for 2018.
So you had a year to come up with a plan with the other departments on the full reconstruct, but it was chosen to go a different direction and do Hanley.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess it wasn't really a choice, it just sort of happened that way. So to be fair, you're right. And last meeting, we did talk about, hey, let's try to throw Vine Street in here and flip-flop it. However, we're late. So, I mean, I don't even think Tom thinks it's even possible to try to do it in 18. So,
I just think if we're gonna do the project that we picked, let's do that project.
the DOT did have, the DOT did have an impact on our decision.
Either way, we could have done a deal. What are they gonna do if we got the road ripped apart?
We didn't know how that was gonna roll out.
Well, what about the high school construction? How did that enter into your decision?
We thought about that too. We thought about, was it good to have it while they're doing it or good not to do it while they're doing it?
They're
And
digging into it. Would've been a good time, save something, maybe.
is it virtually impossible to do Vine Street in 2018?
No.
I'm asking Tom, I'm not asking.
Is it possible? I would say no. Are there some things that might not go well and might delay the project? Probably could be. Keep in mind, one of the other parallel things we would have to do with that is go through the whole assessment hearing procedure, because parts of that would be assessed. Typically, you start the first thing you do on an assessment procedure is the council would order an assessment report, which comes up with a preliminary cost estimate. As far as when that preliminary cost estimate could be done relative to the preliminary work and analysis and field and televising of sewers that we need to do to get the total project cost. I don't have all those dates right at the tip of my tongue. Yeah, the city would have been willing to spend, I don't know, maybe a $40,000-$50,000 up front. We could have started the plan prep 6, 8, 10 months ago. Maybe we can start plan prep tomorrow for a 2019 job, but typically we don't fund that type of thing that far in advance. My answer is no. I don't think it's impossible, but if the direction is to go as fast as you possibly can and get Vine Street done, there's a certain risk that comes with that. And again, we're late in the year, and I'm not going to promise everything's going to go perfect. One of the other issues that we've mentioned last meeting too is there's no budget for the water or the sewer items. So I don't know who wants to deal with that particular item, but there's no budget in the 2018. I've gone over that with Kip a couple different times for that amount of work, because that's part of the project as well.
Well, so we don't get into the same problem with Hanley Road, do we need to do something tonight if we're gonna move?
Well, Hanley Road's a little bit different style project. It's more of a pavement rehabilitation. The only thing that really changes that is we do have to do a substantial amount of curb removal and replacement, but that said, we're we're not reconstructing new. So in other words, the middle of that thing would be real similar to what we did on Grandview. We'd do curb removal and replacement, we'd do a 2-inch mill and overlay. There's going to be virtually no sanitary sewer work. There's no sewer in the street. There virtually will be no water main work. So for us it's a little bit different style plan. So the amount of time it takes to prepare plans and specifications on Hanley is probably a third to a fourth the time that you would do putting plans and specs together for Vine Street. It's a total reconstruct with utility improvements. It requires total field surveys. Hanley Road does not require total field surveys. About the only thing we would do in the field is evaluate whether we think that second phase is gonna have about 10% of the curb removed or 20% of the curb removed, or whatever that percent is. So that said, we don't have to go tonight. We could, if you don't select Hanley and we do it at another meeting, it isn't the kiss of death per se on that project.
I'm gonna move to approve the letter of engagement Bolton Mink with an estimated amount of $117,000 and authorize preparation of plans and specifications.
Second.
Got a motion, a second, discussion?
Could we add into the motion that we'll take a look at the safety of Hanley?
Sure.
Before moving
I
forward?
thought you wanted it to be separate.
Well, I just thought the discussion, I mean,
I agree with you, that's important.
From end to end. The second part of it, just to go back to that next line item where we were talking about the crosswalk is, in the previous finance committee is when we talked about Hanley, not as a council, and then we talked about it in public safety. And public safety, at that point, we didn't know if it was going to be the Vine Street or the Hanley, so I wanted to make a motion in that public safety to make sure that we look at that crosswalk, no matter what, if we do Hanley in 2018. So we don't have to talk about that, but I just want to look at it from end to end from a safety standpoint.
It was all Bill's
Maxwell,
fault.
Hanley.
It was all Bill's fault.
It was
pardon?
So do you want anything, and do you want me to amend the motion that we look at the safety aspects?
Will they do that as part of?
well, that's why I kind of want, and from a discussion standpoint, I thought it's a separate item. Depending on what, we have a scope and a budget and a schedule and an amount from a consultant. Now, depending on what the council's wishes, how big a study are we doing relative to pedestrian crossings? Again, it's the perfect time to look at it. Again, we're doing more of a pavement rehabilitation project. I know even in the last meeting, we had a little question or two about, is that jumping ahead because the Carmichael Road study's going on? But I've had a couple different conversations with Glenn Van Wormer. He's from SEH, and he's the one doing the Carmichael study. And he's also studied that this isn't the first time he studied that intersection. He's looked at those intersections one, if not two, previous times in the last 5 years. And the gut reaction that Glenn has given me is the recommendation coming out of the corridor study. And again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's most likely going to be new signals or with new cabinets, new computers, everything relative to signals, potentially some pavement marking revisions on the Hanley Road side, which would reconfigure the lanes, but he doubts very much if it's going to result in reconstruction, widening the intersection, adding turn lanes. He doesn't think it, so in other words, it's not going to be reconstruction down there. It's going to be more signals and pavement marking revisions. So that's why I don't think we're jumping ahead too much. But getting back to your question, if, depending on the level of analysis, if we're going to look at 3,000 feet and 5 more intersections with ped ramps, and again, I've had some preliminary discussions with Glenn relative to this ped ramp issue, and I wasn't involved with the Public Safety Commission meeting when they discussed that, but I've already got a couple different things from Glenn here about you don't just add something at an intersection. He's the one you should look from Carmichael to Highway 35. Crosswalks on 4-lane roadways are always a problem. They're always difficult. You don't want to put something in there on a temporary basis because typically it's not safe. Another thing is once something's out there, even in a temporary fashion, it's very difficult to change it, very difficult to remove it. he's got a long laundry list of things that he would look at. I think what I would suggest is talking to Glenn, seeing as how he's already doing the corridor study and the intersection work at Hanley and Carmichael, to maybe see what he would think a price would be to look at the whole corridor relative to all these various other issues. I think it'd be a little bit unfair if, with this existing letter of engagement on the pavement rehab side, to say, and, oh, by the way, including in your letter of engagement, you also have to do the following analysis. I would think that'd be a little bit of additional relative to scope.
Well, then I'll keep the original motion.
Well, we've identified a couple different times now, safety issues on Carmichael, or Hanley Road, and now we're gonna ignore them because of one recommendation from the SEH.
No, I don't think we're ignoring them at all.
No.
I think we need to add it as an additional thing.
Okay, well, if that's what we'll do, great.
I totally think we should do that, yeah.
But I would assume you need to get a quote from them on it.
Yeah, I can come back with
Yeah.
this additional analysis of the ped ramps, the intersections.
And to your
You know,
point-
again, when Glenn looks at pedestrian ramps, he's gonna look at like a pedestrian ramp more from like a system. Where's everyone going? They're not just going from the south side of the street across to the north-south. Are they eventually going where and where? And he'd look at it a little bit more big picture to come back with a recommendation.
Great. I just want to make the point that, you know, in my district, if you want to get from our district down to anywhere in Hudson, relative to the city of Hudson, right, you're crossing Hanley twice, or you're going on Stage Line, which is a whole nother safety issue, right, because there's no good walkway. So you have to cross a 4-lane busy street 2 times. Would love to see that walkway on the north side where you don't have to cross, because by and large, the residents are on the north side. So if he could take a look at that, that would be.
Well, no, I think what I should do is talk to Glenn, come up with a scope, maybe it's 4 or 5 or 6 bullet points. We're gonna look at A, B, C, D, and it's X as far as a fee goes, and then come back to council. Maybe we can come back to the next meeting. Glenn's usually pretty good at working with us, and he's real familiar with this area. Again, he's studied those intersections numerous times along Carmichael, so, and I've already had some discussions with him on that, so I could most likely get something back to the council so we know exactly what that scope and fee would be at the next meeting. And I don't want to promise that because it's got to come from Glenn.
All right. We good? Do we have a motion and a second? Okay.
No second. Is there a second?
There was a second.
Jim seconded it, right? Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
New business. Discussion and possible action on timely request for Class B liquor beer license for River Valley Hospitality Center LLC.
Hello, I'm Doug Carl from River Valley Hospitality LLC.
We had given them extension, that was the last extension ends
Right.
October 31st, so they're here to request another extension for their liquor license.
So, and the reason for the request is, you know, we've obviously broken ground on the hotel now. That got delayed longer than we anticipated. We've got action going on and construction going on, so just looking for an additional extension that will line up with when the hotel is completed, as well as the access points into the old golf club are opened up prior to or after the hotel opens.
So the license itself is for the golf club?
It's
clubhouse, the old clubhouse?
So banquet center, and then there'll be a restaurant in there as well.
Okay, have we closed on that?
Say it again?
Have you closed on that,
Closed on
that building?
purchasing it? No, we've got a temporary agreement that's in place. We've got a permanent agreement that will be put in place here shortly.
And how long are you looking for the extension?
June of next year.
3rd June.
3rd June.
Okay.
Wait, excuse me. Hi, Doug Rohde, also River Valley Hospitality Center and LHR Hospitality. So we have, on the previous extensions, we hadn't started the construction of the hotel yet, And so, you know, we were throwing a little bit of a dart. We now have everything in concrete. We've broken ground. We have our construction schedule. Anyone that has driven by there has probably seen the machinery, has seen all the equipment out there, has seen the limited access that has. We do have a plan. We're going through a variety of you know, different designs on the clubhouse and ultimately what's that going to be, type and flavor and how it works, and we'll have that. We're well underway on that, and that lines up, our extension request lines up to the exact construction schedule where the final pavement, landscaping, everything can be done at one time, both for the hotel and the center. So, you know, I hate to say that we're forced into a little bit of this time schedule crunch, but what we want to avoid is certainly getting this event center and restaurant open too early, and then having some major constraints with access and safety and all those type things. So we're throwing out the real date. I know it seems like a long time. We apologize for the delays on this. Some of that's been out of our control, but we are very, very confident at this point that we'll be in good shape.
How many rooms for the hotel, Doug?
96.
Anybody? Any questions?
I'll move we approve the extension to July 1st,
Second.
2018.
Motion is second. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion's approved. Thanks, guys. Discussion and possible action on the amendment of the City of Hudson Comprehensive Plan land use designation single and two-family residential to downtown commercial, 708 2nd Street.
Thank you. This is the first of two steps to consummate the rezoning of Mr. Freese's property if the council so desires. The B4 zoning district was set up to accommodate growth of the downtown business district. So the only properties in which can be rezoned to B4 are properties that are contiguous to B3, the existing downtown commercial district. Any use within a B4 district is subject to approval of a conditional use permit. So another public hearing, a whole other process of approval as opposed to in other zoning districts where you would have development plans approved and not a public hearing. The first step, like I said, is the amendment to the comp plan. So the comp plan future land use map. The comp plan never anticipated having a B4 zoning district, so this would be the first time that that's been amended, but it would be consistent with the intent of the B4 zoning district. And then the second item would be for the actual rezoning itself. Now, as was referenced in the public comment portion, or in the public hearing on this item, an individual, a neighbor, had raised some concerns, especially pertaining to access to the property and whether that could be something that could be granted off of 2nd Street or if it would be utilizing the existing alley. A couple points on that. I think the council has, and the applicant is here tonight too to present if need be, but I think there's really a couple things here. The first is it's a state highway. Do we have control over access, allowing accesses onto 2nd Street? The intensity of the use, so how much traffic does his use generate? It's an office building he'd like to construct there. There's obviously he has employees, so trying to avoid the alleyway was, I think, the main gist of that comment. So it'd be, you know, either the council could consider approving it, denying it. You could make it contingent to getting access off of 2nd Street and have it, and that'd be the only way it'd be approved, or you could postpone action on the item until verification of access could be provided. clear as mud, right?
Yeah, is there a motion?
Hans, do you want to talk about what, I'd like for him to at least,
Well, I'll tell you, we had a lot of discussion about this in Plan Commission. Even a resident that is on the Plan Commission had some concerns about encroaching, the businesses encroaching on private property. And so we looked at this pretty tight and to make sure it was okay. So it's a good plan, and he's a good neighbor, he understands it, so.
So you recommended to approve it?
Yes.
Planning Commission, okay.
With the access off a Second?
It was conditional, wasn't it, Mike? Off a Second, we don't know because they haven't issued it yet. The DOT.
No, I know, but
I'm Hans Fries, 221 Vine Street, representing Fries Properties. And for us, making the building feasible, it definitely hinges on access from the Second Street, which we're gonna submit the plans to to the city of Hudson, also to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. If Wisconsin Department of Transportation says, yes, we can have access, then I think we would move forward. Otherwise, we're not going to do any building that we access from the alley. Doesn't make any sense from our perspective.
Just a question for Mike, please. Is it important for the zoning decision to have access from 35? I mean, would you want it zoned before without that access?
it meets the intent of the ordinance. It is contiguous, which was the basic premise for the B4 district, right? It wasn't.
I'm just thinking of having a zoning amendment conditional on a permission that you're not going to get for who knows how long. You've got to publish the ordinance within, I believe, 10 days of adoption, and it may be better to postpone until you know that you have that access.
At which point we would have to publish again.
Publish again for,
well, no. We've had the public hearing, we should
I don't
be
think you
fine
need to
then.
publish
No.
again for anything.
I think you could, but there's also the controls in place through the CUP process, which was what the plan commission was thinking, right? It was, I don't want to insert myself in it was, we have the control. If they tried to use the alleyway as their primary access for the development, that the CUP wouldn't be approved. Now, the zoning would be there.
okay, so you're saying that the access from Second Street would be a condition like
Of the CUP.
Okay.
Exactly, yep.
Okay, not a condition of the zoning,
No.
okay.
I mean, we didn't say that?
I just wanted to
Sure you did.
clarify.
And again, that was why it was so important, I think, is we're talking about these transitional districts to have the control through the CUP process, right? Through another public hearing. But I also understand the chicken and the egg piece too, right? So,
But if the access from the highway isn't approved, then what will you be using the property for?
Office building.
If it's not approved? If
No, it's not approved. We're not gonna build anything.
So then would we
No.
have to zone it back to
No.
residential, or,
no, it'd still be contiguous, so the
Okay.
zoning would still be B4.
okay? So somebody might want to use it for something else then?
Yep, which would be subject to conditional use permit approval.
Yep.
Okay.
So I'll move to recommend approval.
I think you need two motions, one on the comp plan, which is B, and one on the zoning. Just keep it separate so it's clear.
Yep.
Two separate items.
Do you see 7B
B is one.
is amending the comprehensive plan?
Okay. So moved.
Which one are you gonna move? Oh,
To amend the comprehensive plan.
okay.
7B.
All right.
I don't see where that is, but it will get.
Is, yeah, I'm looking for it. Is there a,
I'll second that.
okay, we've got a motion and a second.
They're two separate items here.
Not here.
Got it.
They are.
Are they?
Next one.
No?
I thought it'd be easier just to have one staff report instead of three separate ones.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I see. I crossed my B off too soon.
Yeah.
I don't have my readers, I can't even see them.
All right, so we got a motion, and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Randy?
Move, C,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Okay, from R2 to two-family residential district to B4 central business district.
Second.
Motion second, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Thank you, guys. Discussion of possible action on request by the Village of North Hudson and Town of Hudson for change in funding formula for St. Croix EMS municipal contributions.
We did, just, it's on the table tonight, we did get the minutes from the towns, just for verification.
Oh, yeah, we got resolutions from both.
Yep.
Are you looking to have action tonight, or what did you want?
I think that's the intent.
Yeah.
Well, they brought this up in the past, and I think it was 2 meetings ago, I said, well, we'll put it on the council agenda, and council can vote on it. And that's why we have it on the agenda. And I think the underlying reason is that they're at their levy limit, and they can't afford the increases that we know are going to occur going forward. So they're looking at it, they say, to get a more equitable formula for funding. And of course, what's equitable is in the eye of the beholder. And we can talk about that a little bit. But right now, the taxpayers of the 4 entities account for 28% of the financial support of St. Croix EMS. And of that amount, of that percentage, Hudson taxpayers pay 50% of that amount. Under the proposed formula, the amount that, or the percentage that Hudson residents would be paying would be 60%. And the impact, I think, Brenda, we can talk about that a little bit later. The other 72% of the funding for St. Croix EMS is from payments from users of the service. And there's no dispute that most of the services are the result of activity within the city of Hudson because of the hospital, the nursing homes, and because the population is larger than it is in any of the partner communities. So therefore, most of the revenue is generated by activities in Hudson. And that part of the equation has not been contemplated, or at least discussed by our partners. They want Hudson taxpayers to pay more because they say that the Hudson taxpayers use more of the system. But on the other hand, they don't want to account for the increased revenue that those runs generate for the service that are paid by users in Hudson. So that's the equitable part of it. Is it just solely on the taxpayer contribution, or does the revenue also have to be considered? And Brenda can probably now address some other issues, one of which is that there are costs that are absorbed by the city that are not passed on to our partners.
When this proposal came forward from the Village of North Hudson and Town of Hudson, we looked at administrative salaries that we're allocating to the EMS fund, and if they're at the proper percentage. So when our accounts payable and payroll clerk, when she is doing the EMS payroll, or she is paying bills for the EMS fund, is her salary being allocated? When I'm doing not so much the last 6 months of more of the studies, but when I'm doing monthly reports for the EMS committee, those kind of things. And what we came up with is that there's salaries that are sitting in other funds of the city, primarily the general fund of $15,764, that aren't being allocated over to the EMS fund. And then we looked at the rent that we're charging for downstairs. When the police department left in 2011, EMS took over downstairs, but yet the rent payment that the EMS fund is paying is the same rent payment at $400 per month that they paid when they had 2 offices. So they have the entire downstairs, but they're paying $400 per month, the fund. So it's things like that we feel that we're not allocating those costs over, so we are keeping some of the funds here at the city.
So Brenda, what is the financial impact if the council approves this request by the partners that it be 50-50?
50-50 for 2018 budget would be approximately $285,000 compared to the current funding formula this year of $233,648, which is at the $17 per capita.
And what would it be, what would the difference be over 5 years?
Over 5 years, the 50-50 would be about 1.9 million compared to the per capita at 1,586,000. The difference is 348,000 or 70,000 per year over that 5-year period that the city would.
That's on average, so.
It's on average.
That number is increasing though annually?
It is. When I presented the budget at the last commission meeting, we were at $19.25. As you recall, we were talking this summer. That per capita number is now down to $17. And that's because of health insurance in the fund. We have some new paramedics that are taking single coverage instead of family coverage, so we have some savings there. The city had a 0% increase for health insurance this year. And then the EMS director and the operations supervisor will be taking 3 shifts per week between them to do some savings. So we went from the 19.25 down to the 17.
Brenda, is the idea of having a per capita with different communities in one venture, like St. Croix EMS, is that's a fair way of allocating the cost for that service?
It's a way that's easy to identify, and it's based on everybody having equal access to the service. Everybody had the potential for using the services the same for that population.
Okay, well, let's talk some assumptions. Assuming we don't adopt a 50-50, both the township and the village will RFP for different service? I'm assuming that's what I've heard.
What they have threatened to do is that they want to, in fact, they brought a motion, Tim Foster brought a motion at the meeting before last saying, well, if you don't approve it, then, in fact, I'm gonna bring a motion right now that we have an RFP for the service.
Yeah.
And I said, well, let's, before you get down that road, let's, we'll bring it up to the city council. They can't afford it, is the bottom line. So I assume they would look for alternatives.
They do have to provide a 5-year notice.
Right.
That is part of the
So
contract.
we've already done this with the fire department. This 50-50 with a run
12
model
years
scenario.
ago.
And when we did do that, they agreed to do it kind of slowly over time, not the immediate hit or impact. Conversations I've had with individuals on EMS is that if we do this, they're sort of in it to win it. They're in it for the long haul. Like they feel like if we could go to this model, that this would be a good sign, and they would continue to support St. Croix EMS and with the new funding model. So from my perspective, it is clearly a way forward. Is it the best solution? I don't know. I kind of agree with sort of phasing it in. But to me, it's trying to, all of us to work together to figure out how to get Synchro EMS further down the road.
There's one difference between fire and EMS, though, is that, EMS generates revenue by what it does, and most of the funding, 68% or 72%, is not provided by the taxpayers. So it's a little bit different, in that respect.
Sure.
From the fire model. One way or the other, there's going to be a burden on taxpayers that they don't want to have. And so, do we want to put it on to Hudson because our partners can't afford it? Or?
We've already had people say they're willing to take on the burden because they want EMS. So I don't quite agree with that statement. Whether I'm right or not, that's fine. But we've had lots and lots and lots of people say they're willing to pay more for EMS.
I understand. I'm saying that they're taking on a burden from other taxpayers outside of the city of Hudson. That's what I'm talking about.
Kind of like the library.
And, well, we can get into that discussion as well. They're not currently paying their fair share of the library. So, I mean, to me, that's kind of a trade-off, but.
I think it's a good idea. I just because otherwise we're forcing this into some sort of weird, fray. Why don't we try to at least look at a number that it comes with? And if we can't make it work even in that scenario, then we have to consider alternatives. But I think we're going to be able to make it work. I don't know why. I'm an optimist, as the mayor says, but I think this is a good thing for all of our communities involved.
Well, if we're 50-50, are they gonna put some more skin in the game and help find a sustainable solution? Do we know that?
No, they won't. Well, they can't. I mean, that's why they're doing this.
Well, I'm not even saying necessarily money, but whatever, I guess that's probably the biggest one, but.
I guess to answer your question, the conversation I've had is that they won't leave Synchro EMS. See what I'm saying?
Which would end up costing us a lot more.
Well, some more. So, yeah, I think it's a good idea. That's me.
The other part of it is, we're paying 50%, but everybody has an equal vote. And so, Town of Troy that has,
And they have a third of their,
a minuscule amount of runs has the same voting power as the city of Hudson. Does that seem fair?
In terms of recommendations you're talking about, or?
Voting
Yeah,
power.
voting power in the commission.
Yeah, but that's strictly a recommendation
is,
to
it
the
is. I'm
council.
just
Solely
saying.
advisory, yeah.
I mean, it is a city department.
Right.
I guess would it get us to our eventual solution to the issue quicker with our partners if we were to do 50-50. And hopefully, ultimately, in the long run, save us money.
It just depends on who you want to share that burden. That's what it is.
Well, frankly, I think it's a bad idea for what it's worth, for a variety of reasons. We talked about the budget earlier tonight. We talked about potentially being at levy limits ourselves in 2 years. We're going to try to do things that would mitigate that, but this would be an added burden that would move us that much closer to being at levy limits, which would put us on an equal footing with the other communities, because then we'll all be at levy limits. And but I just don't see picking up an additional burden for our taxpayers. I don't think, you know what, we did hear from taxpayers that said they're more than willing to pay more taxes for an EMS service. They didn't, for the most part, understand that, maybe we can't pay enough in taxes to be able to pay for the service going forward for an extended period of time, because we would be at levy limits. And quite frankly, over the past several months, I've heard from a lot of people that said, I don't know that that this is a good idea, that we should be doing this. So, we've had a couple setbacks here recently. Our folks are now being taxed to pay for not only our library system, but in addition, they're being taxed to pay for the library systems of our surrounding communities. That's one example of our taxpayers already paying money that they shouldn't be paying to support a service that was more or less imposed on us. I don't like that. We represent about half of the total service area population-wise, meaning that potentially, you know, our neighbors represent one half of the total, potentially one half of the total usage of this service. Moreover, and I think this is an important point, is that this is a standby service. This is a service that is available to everybody in our community in the service area. And what our surrounding communities, partners, are telling us is that they want to pick up a larger share of having that standby service available for them. And I don't agree with that at all. As Brenda had said, this is you know, about equal access. Everybody has equal access right now, and they're paying a fair share for that equal access. We start to skew that in order to keep our partners in. All that does is it once again exacerbates our situation relative to our levy limits, and I just don't think it's fair to our taxpayers. And back to the point about the library, you know, we've got members right now that aren't contributing their fair share to the library, to the extent that we've been picking up additional costs over the last several years to be able to open the library on Mondays, and then going forward to keep it open on Mondays. And they are benefiting from that access, and they're benefiting from the fact that our taxpayers are shouldering that burden for them. And here we go again. I just think this is bad policy. I think we're going down the wrong road with this. This is absurd for us to consider having our taxpayers pay more so that they don't make good on their threat to go to an RFP and perhaps leave this agreement that we have.
I've got a couple of points. One is that if we continue to build senior housing, then we're going to continue to have a larger percentage of the runs in Hudson. And so then that's going to exacerbate the problem. So we may be looking at even larger numbers down the road rather than the estimates that Brenda has given us. Another thing to bring up is that one of the reasons that the county got out of the EMS services is that the same problem. The smaller municipalities didn't want to have to pay for a county service. You know, this was, what, 35 years ago or something like that, but same issue. And so are we going to go down that road? And I agree with Rich. I don't think that it's a good idea to do that.
I still think it's a good idea. I want to move that we approve the new proposed funding model for St. Croix EMS, 50/50 with 50% per capita and whatever the 50% 5-year run average for calls. It's like the fire model, and except we get money.
Just to clarify, the fire model is 50% valuation, just to clarify.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion purposes.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I'm trying to weigh the situation, whereas if we do, either way, if they pull out, we got 5 years to figure out, we're still gonna get a bigger burden on our taxpayers. So if they're suggesting they're gonna stay in longer if we do a 50/50 model, we're offsetting that cost that we would be pushing onto the taxpayer. Is all love and fair and war and love and war and blah, blah. It's tough. Go ahead.
If they give us notice, they're still bound by any increases that we would vote to in order to go down the road that was proposed in June. So they're still bound to pay for that. Now, in the event that, on the other hand, we want to be good neighbors and let them out of the agreement because of the financial situation that they're in, and shorten or eliminate the notice period, One of the models, as I recall, that was brought forward was in the event that they left and what would happen to the service. And obviously, we would be able to cut back on the number of ambulances and the number of staff to make it more affordable for us, which would reduce our cost, I think, overall a little bit anyway. So I don't know about that, but.
I'll just say one last thing. They've been asking for this for a very long time. Previous mayor didn't even want to discuss it. So I think it's in good faith to try to come up with a relationship that, you know, this thing is far from over. Clearly, we know that. And if all of this ends up going to an RFP, which it should, because the last mile proposed was less than good, in my opinion, that's going to happen. However, this is what they've been asking for a very long time, and nobody's really been listening. And I know this because I've talked to lots of people over the last 5 years. So I think it's a good idea, which is why I made the motion.
All right, anybody else?
From their perspective, at least what I keep hearing is that their request is based on we use it more than they do, so therefore we should pay more than we do. Your comments about the income then comes from us as well. So it's not a well-balanced situation either way.
What's equitable, you know, that's what it is. Or
Yeah,
that's what
whatever
that's
that-
what
whatever
they
that
say
word
it
means.
is, you know.
All right. Everybody good? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
The motion is not approved 4-2. All right, so moving on, discussion and possible action on appointment to Public Utilities Commission.
Mayor O'Connor has indicated we've got 2 terms that are up here in October. One of them is the city council, which is Joyce, and the way that works is she would serve the 3-year term, assuming she continues on the council. If, you know, she would leave the council, then someone else would be appointed. And the other one is for Susie Coram, be the other 3-year term. And now when we did the changeover, we set them up so that it would be a 1-year and 2-year. Now everybody will be 3-year terms, so we get a rotation there.
Okay. We have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and second to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on appointment to the St. Croix Economic Development Corporation Loan Review Committee.
This is not the St. Croix Business Park, but the St. Croix Economic Development. They have an opening for a city resident, so this would be an appointment to that.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve.
Before Susie Coram as well.
Okay. We've got a motion, a second. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. I don't have anything that I can think of for the council. Anybody? Kathy?
Public safety has drones, right?
Yes.
Where's it at? We have another, well, you probably saw that.
Yeah, it's in, I think, city attorney's hands. She's drafting an ordinance, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've gotten memos on, or emails on that,
Yeah.
and
You recommended to adopt one like one of the cities we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's coming.
Okay.
Just to follow up, I will get a hold of everyone as soon as the budget packets are ready for you guys to pick up. And John has indicated he wanted a PDF. If anybody else does, just let me know. Okay.
Yeah, same here.
So who wants hard copies?
I do.
I do.
4, and then the
Please.
3 want PDFs. Okay. I will
Sorry
do
about that.
Thank you. No,
You know,
that's fine.
they're taking a tree down in front of my house. You can, I'll ask them if they'll just
You have to hand mill
contribute
it
that,
yourself, though, you know.
yeah.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Is there a motion?
Move to adjourn.
No, we have a closed session.
Oh, we have a closed session. Oh, man, well, that's why I closed that, I guess. All right, sorry about that. So is there a motion?
So moved to go into closed session.
Got a motion and a second to go into closed session. Roll call.
Excuse me, sir, I think you forgot one item, that is the Surrey Oaks agenda item.
That was approved on consent.
So I sat here and...
Don't you enjoy civic engagement?
We have items that we take at the beginning of the meeting. They're all one pulse. So you're set.
Thank you for participating.
Bill, did you second that
Surrey,
motion?
yes, grand opening.
Roll call?
I'm sorry. Morissette?
Yes.
Alms?
Yes.
McCormick?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Hoggett?
Yes.
Dahl?
Yes.
Okay, motion's approved. We're in closed session. Thank you. All right,
I'll move to approve the transaction that was discussed in closed session and authorize the mayor to sign the necessary documents to effect it.
Second.
and a motion is second. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Now,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
got a motion second and a lot of seconds to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.